It has never been more prevalent in conversation. It has never had more awareness, yet people's mental health rates continue to decline. These two things just don't match up if all it takes is, say, normalization and awareness of these topics in order to fix them. I think the conversation we are having, while it is a worthwhile conversation, I think we're having it in the wrong way. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to our channel where we try to figure out what it means to be and how to become superhuman. Today, I wanted to talk about the current state of mental health in our society. So I'm going to go over some of my perspectives on this topic. However, I just want it to be known that I do not think of myself as an authority on this subject. I am just merely somebody who spent most of their life feeling like their mind was their biggest enemy, and now it has started to feel like my biggest asset over the last few years, and just going to share some of my perspectives and opinions on what helped me understand this topic and apply some beneficial practices and perspectives to myself. However, if before we get into things, you wouldn't mind subscribing to our channel and tossing a thumbs up on this video, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get started. First and foremost, one of the largest issues that I see is our obsession with diagnosing these things, making them almost seem as if they are states of who we are and will be for eternity. So it's no longer I'm feeling depressed because of XYZ, it is I am a depressed person, or it is no longer I feel anxious when ABC thing is happening, but I am an anxious person. And as soon as we start making these things part of our identity, they become a lot harder to let go of because they are actually your own conception of self. They start reinforcing that more and more. And I think a large reason for this obsession with diagnosing is so that we can make it easy on the treatment side, so that we can sit there and go, well, you have this, say, chemical imbalance, so we can now give you this prescription. And I don't think that these conversations are actually getting to the root of things. Another issue that I see is it goes into one of two conversations, which is you either have a chemical imbalance or people tend to think that it is a childhood trauma issue. And don't get me wrong, there's the realities there. Those are real issues, but not everything can get tossed into those two boxes. And I think a lot of the preconceptions when people go into therapy is like a therapist is almost looking for those things, and people can end up actually coming out of therapy worse than they went in and often create perspectives that maybe weren't actually there, that aren't accurate. I've seen people and friends go into therapy and then come out of it with almost as if it's like they have a grudge or a resentment or a bitterness towards their parents afterwards. I think this is where a lot of that issue comes from with people's mental health, where they start to feel like they should have gotten things in their childhood that they didn't. I have somebody that I'm close to whose father is very hardened, the type of person that would not tell you that he loves you because he doesn't know how to communicate those styles of emotion. But then when you take into consideration that that father's father was something called a train orphan, during the war times, if children lost both of their parents, they would be put on trains and sent to different towns and essentially auctioned off as indentured servants. This person's father's father was more or less a slave. And you can have these perspective changes of, okay, this person wasn't able to give me what I wanted, or that can become, wow, I'm really glad that my parents, despite all of their shortcomings, still had enough wherewithal to make a better life for me to not have to be in that same position that they were. I think it is this constant negative framing, this woe is me, that is leading to more and more mental health issues. And I think we are telling people to revel in those issues. Another aspect that I think is leading to worsening mental health is this idea that you're a good person if you're going to therapy and doing the work. I'm not saying that people shouldn't go to therapy. Whatever works for you works for you. go through with that. But what I'm getting at here is how people get stuck in the process of quote unquote healing themselves, and then this leads to incessant re-diagnosis of issues, going deeper. Once you've healed this issue, you can now substitute it with this issue. To me, you shouldn't be proud that you're going to therapy. You should be proud that you no longer need it. Now, again, I'm not saying you should be shamed for going to therapy. There's a wide gap there between shame and pride, but I don't think we should make it into part of our identity, just like we diagnose ourselves with this kind of stuff, to sit there and then say, I am a better person because I go to therapy. And I know people aren't saying this outright, but it's very similar to the spiritual world, I find, where it becomes a superiority complex of, look at the work I'm doing. I am better because I'm improving myself in this way. And then again, when you allow that to become part of your sense of self, and also you are starting to provide self-value through those things, then it is going to be impossible to get over them. But now I want to talk a little bit more about the link between physical health and mental health and how this gets brushed under the table all the time. You will see people go into therapy and get, say, prescribed certain medications right away, or they'll get told to do certain thinking practices, and this is coming from somebody who spent a few sessions in therapy, I very rarely ever hear about the link of physical health and mental health. I mean, this even goes back thousands of years. We're just now discovering through peer-reviewed studies and such that our gut health, what we eat, how we treat ourselves, has a great amount of influence on our mental faculties, everything from energy to happiness and fulfillment levels, serotonin, dopamine, all of these kind of chemicals. I've never heard somebody talk about how their therapist said they need to go through physical exercise, that they need to be walking for 30 minutes to an hour a day, that they should go to the gym and hit the weights, or that they should push themselves into a better physical conditioning. We tend to think that we'll leave that towards the physicians, doctors, but even they will look to try to give prescriptions before any lifestyle changes. I'm not going to be able to pull a study out of my ass on this one, but I think it is impossible to be severely overweight and to be mentally fit. But you never hear either doctors or psychiatrists give that perspective, because it might hurt their feelings or contribute negatively to their mental health. And I'm not saying they should shame them, but I think ignoring or enabling that behavior, which is actually, I believe, leading to a lot of their negative issues, is worse than the short-term uncomfort of having to deal with the fact that you aren't as healthy and it's your fault that you're not that way. I mean, at this point, it's been proven that SSRIs aren't as effective as exercise. I believe the number is exercise is actually 1.5 times more effective than SSRIs, and this just never is part of the conversation. We're told that for people's mental health to get better, we need to affirm their life choices and make sure that they don't feel bad for the choices that they've made at all. It's nonsense. It's leading to a culture of unhealthy people, both physically and mentally. It's helping nobody except pharmaceutical manufacturers. Now, let's get into the lack of conversation about meaning and the incessant focus on happiness and sadness. I think focusing on our mental health as a scale between sadness and happiness and portraying it as if almost there is an eternal state of happiness that you can reach is one of those leading factors in why mental health is continuing to decline, because You can't have happiness without sadness. Those two things are completely intertwined. They're a scale, they're a balance. If, let's say, you did reach this place of eternal happiness, that would just become your new baseline. We're selling people a false sense of mind that they can achieve, and then they feel like they're dysfunctional for the fact that they haven't achieved this state of happiness, which I believe, and this has been largely influenced to me by existentialist thinkers like Schopenhauer and Friedrich Nietzsche, is that the world is actually characterized by suffering. There is nothing you can do to get away from suffering. Everybody you know will perish at some point, but what never gets talked about is how meaning and purpose, finding a reason for that suffering, something, a cause or a even just like your family or any of these things can become reasons and give purpose to your suffering. And I think that is where the conversation needs to head, because even now, I think a lot of people just feel like their life is completely inconsequential, that their life is meaningless. They could be wiped off the face of the planet tomorrow and not much would change. Sure, maybe your close family would feel something for a moment, but then later on everybody would be forgetful and go on with their life. And that is largely true. But that's why you need something bigger than yourself, and that's where responsibility comes in. Just like happiness and sadness are tied together, meaning and responsibility are tied together. So the more responsibility that you pick up in your life, the more meaningful it will become, because more people and more things will become dependent on your existence, and that in and of itself is something that our brains crave and need for a feeling of importance. Who do you think you are? You're so special, or this or that. And it's like, no, take your life seriously. Think that your life has weight. Think of yourself as somebody that is capable of affecting change in a positive direction and going after that. Without these things, how are you not just supposed to fall into a pit of nihilism and become extremely depressed? Find a reason to live, because life doesn't just give you one at the start of it. This is that old Nietzschean concept that is, he who has a why can bear almost any how. You need to have a sense of meaning in your life. Your mind craves it. Stop thinking about things on a scale of happiness and sadness, and realize that with that purpose, it will drag you through any hard times that you ever have and will make it all worth it in the end. So to recap, if you want your mental health to improve, you have to improve your physical health. Don't allow labels to become part of your self-conception of who you are. Don't allow yourself to say things like, I am depressed or I am anxious. These will only root these ideas and concepts into your own mode of being, and then your mind will constantly try to reaffirm to you that you are those things and look for examples of reasons that you should feel that way, etc. While going to therapy is a good bet, I wouldn't steer anybody away from it hard. Also, don't think it is the end all and be all. Realize that when you go into therapy, the goal is to get out of it. If you want to continue thinking about these topics, I think it's much more advantageous to pick up the original texts, the original thinkers, philosophers, psychologists, etc., that paved the way for our current understanding of these things, and make sense of their concepts on your own. Carl Jung is a good example of this. Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, Arthur Schopenhauer, the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. I think all of these people gave a much better picture of how you can have a impactful, meaningful life than our current culture promotes. And lastly, understand that perspective shifts are major. You can find endless amount of things that you can be bitter and resentful about, and you can find endless amounts of things to be grateful towards. And you have to take control of your own mental faculty, because as humans, we are risk adverse, we are negative oriented, we are constantly looking for threats to our own existence. And that means that naturally we are going to end up staring down that negative barrel. You have to take the reins, and it really does become like a muscle, like anything else that you work out in the gym to get stronger, to get more positive. You have to work these things out. So journaling, write down 10 things every day that you are grateful for. Even if you end up repeating the same things every day, that is better off than allowing yourself to stay in a negative frame of mind. I hope this video gave some good insights into mental health. Maybe I'm entirely wrong here. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you think that I am on the right track with my perspectives about mental health. And if not, I would love to course correct if somebody is able to give me a better perspective. So with that said, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with new videos, and we'll catch you next time.